Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. Hey, what's up, 8-Bit crew? Today is Thursday, October 29th, 2020, and this is episode 14 of the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast. Welcome back, folks. I got a great lineup for you later on. Today, we're going to talk about dealing with some of those problem students and how we can turn demons into angels. We've got a cool little Google Slides trick for you that is sitting in the treasure chest right now, but first, let's get into some news and updates. So in some Google news, Google Workspace add-ons are now going to be available in Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Slides. Right now, they're already available in Calendar, Gmail, and Google Drive. Basically, what it is the sidebar that you may have seen in your Gmail or something like that. You can add add-ons directly from there. You'll just, on that little side panel, click the plus button, and then you can add in some different add-ons. And some of them will pop up right there on that side panel, so you don't have to go through the whole add-on menu and all that to access it. So something that Google has done to make things just a little bit quicker and easier to access. It's their whole workspace idea is trying to seamlessly integrate all of their different apps together so that you don't have to keep switching back and forth between them. And speaking of apps and add-ons, Google just announced the release of their new app called App Sheet. Basically what it is, it's Google Cloud's no-code development platform. So basically it allows people to create apps and such without having to do any of the coding and learn the coding stuff. So if you've got an idea for an app that you think somebody should have developed or should be developed right now, check out App Sheet and maybe you can develop it yourself and get a little something going on the side. And the last new thing from Google is the ability to now grant Drive files access directly from Gmail. So if you ever had those issues where you sent a file to somebody from your Google Drive and then you get all of those emails requesting access. So maybe you shared a link with students and then you got 50 emails asking for access from different ones. What you had to do previously was open up that document, go into the share settings and do all of that. Now, if you get an email requesting access for a file, you can actually grant that access right there in the email. So you just change the share settings. You don't even have to go into your Google Drive or into that document at all. So again, another way that all of this stuff is being integrated together to save you steps, to save you clicks, and save you time. And the last update comes from Edji. If you don't know about Edji, you should definitely check it out. Edji is one of my favorite apps out there, edji.it. Edji is an online collaborative annotation platform where students can annotate, highlight a text, and kind of see what each other is highlighting and commenting. Edji has just recently announced that they will be integrating Microsoft's Immersive Reader into their platform. They're doing it in honor of Dyslexia Awareness Month. And it's a great thing for any of your students who are struggling readers. When they highlight a text in Edji now, in the little comment box, there is an option to use the immersive reader, so they can do that and it will read it out and help them out as well. So definitely, if you use Edji, check that out. If you don't use Edji, you should definitely check out Edji. Well, that will just about take care of news and updates. So I've got this key. I think we should go ahead and unlock and see what's inside today's treasure chest. So the tip in today's treasure chest is something that I actually just kind of stumbled across the other day, and that's something in Google Slides that has to do with playing videos. So if you've embedded videos on your Google Slides before, if there was a setting to where you could have it automatically play as soon as you clicked over to the slide. But sometimes you don't want to play videos right away when you click on a slide. You might have to lead into it, or you're waiting for something to click it. And so then you would have to take your mouse and you would have to go over onto the slide page and actually click on the video on the slide. And it's just like it can be a difficult kind of process. But the other day when I was working on something completely different, I stumbled across this option in Google Slides now for playing videos on click. And so what you do if you click on, like if you've loaded a video into a slide and then clicked on it, instead of clicking the options there, if you click on animation, like what you would do to reveal a text or to fade in slide stuff as you go on, now there's an option in there that will allow you to start the video on a click. So like let's say if I got a video and I have my clicker connected to my computer, then I can just click it from wherever I am. I don't have to click directly on the video itself, and it will start playing. So that was a cool new feature that I just kind of stumbled across in Google Slides and thought I would share, because I know sometimes it can be a pain to have to walk back over to your computer and find the mouse and all that kind of stuff. So check that out. I'll put either, like a little walkthrough or maybe a GIF file in the show notes so that you can kind of see how that works. Well, that's it for the intro. We better get our gear and our weapons ready, because up next, we got to fight with some demons. I want to start the boss battle segment today telling a story about something that happened to me on my very first day of teaching. So if you listen to episode 1 where I recounted my story to education, you may remember a little bit of this being mentioned. So I came into education kind of through the back door back in 2007, especially when Georgia was really hurting for teachers. There was a way of getting certified while you were working on getting your license if you already had a degree. So I already had my bachelor's degree. I had passed all of the certification exams to be a high school teacher, and so that I got hired on with a temporary certificate while I was getting my education degree. So my very first day of teaching back in the fall of 2007 was actually my very first day in a classroom. Because of the way that I got into education, I did not have to go through a lot of the student teaching and all of that. That being said, I studied youth ministry as my undergrad degree, and so it's not that I had not worked with teenagers before, been involved in groups with a lot of teenagers and all that, but it goes without saying that this was a very different context. Working with students in a youth group at a church is very different from working with students in a school setting. Even though there is obviously some overlap there as far as teenagers being teenagers. So my very first day of teaching was, like I said, the first day that I had ever been in a room with students. I was teaching 9th grade literature at that time, so I had freshmen coming in. And, back in 2007, I was in my early mid-20s, so I wasn't too far out of their kind of age range at that point. There were, seniors at the school that were only a handful of years younger than me at that time. And so I started working through my day, and, day one, go through the syllabus and talk about procedures and all that kind of boring stuff. And so I was doing all of that, working my way through class periods, trying to get to know my students and all that kind of stuff. And then the final class period comes in. So as I'm going over syllabus, procedures, all that kind of stuff, I have a student in class raises his hand, asks me if he can go to the restroom. And I just told him to hang on for a minute because I was in the middle of explaining something and he could go later on. Well, he didn't like that. So he decided that he was just going to go anyway. So he gets up out of his seat, starts walking towards the door and has to, pass by me. And so I told him to go sit down, and I kind of stepped in front of him and said, I need you to go back to your seat. And the kid got nose to nose with me, no joke. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, I'm going to get fired on my first day of teaching because this student's going to end up taking a swing at me and I'm going to end up getting into a fight with it. And I could tell, looking at his eyes, I could tell how furious he was. This guy he had just a lot of anger hidden on inside of him. And he was standing there and neither we both kind of had this little stare down for it was probably only like 5 or 10 seconds, but it felt like several minutes. And I was just waiting. I was waiting for this kid to just take a swing at me. And all I was thinking, honestly, back then in my younger days, I was just thinking, you better hope it knocks me out, because if it doesn't, you're going down, buddy. And, fortunately, nothing came of it. Another student actually kind of stepped in and said, told him to sit down, kind of broke him out of his anger, blindness or whatever. And it actually went on without incident. But it did kind of set up something that happened throughout the year, because, in the following weeks, this guy, he was that typical student, that one that comes to mind a lot when you think problem student. He was not an overly disruptive behavior problem, but he never did anything. He was definitely not motivated. He had a real negative attitude in class. Would misbehave to a certain extent, but never enough to warrant a write-up or any kind of major issues. But it did cause problems in class, and it was something that continued on. And so I stayed with it. I continued to try to work with him throughout the following weeks. And later on into the year, I actually found out some kind of background about him from my co-teacher at the time, and come to find out that he had grown up and was living just in a really bad situation, living in poverty, living in a bad kind of atmosphere. He was really far behind skill-wise in class, and that life situation, I kind of saw and realized is a lot of what made him the way that he was. And so I continued I stuck with him. I continued to work with him, and I just tried to put a lot of effort into basically kind of like the stuff I talk about now today, loving him and showing love to him, just to make him feel welcome in my classroom. Kind of like I talked about last week with the different levels of Maslow's hierarchy, student needs, and all that kind of stuff. And, eventually he did come around. He didn't make any huge giant strides in my class. He did pass, but it was one of those, like, he barely passed at the end of the semester, doing enough and all that. But one of the biggest things is he became, like, his great strides came just in his behavior. He became less disruptive. He was not a problem in my class. And we're talking about a kid who had some serious anger issues. And he did really well for me, even to the point where he eventually became kind of an advocate for me in class. He would tell other students to stop talking, to stop being disruptive or disrespectful or something like that, which I thought was just incredible. And what I realized is a lot of it was kind of the time and the effort that I put into him. He eventually became somebody who worked really hard for me, even if his grades did not necessarily reflect that as far as skill mastery goes. But his grades did reflect that in the end outcome as far as how he did in class. And, I don't know where he really is. I don't know what he's doing now, but, that story really has stuck with me my entire career. And it has become kind of a starting point for how I have worked to try to change some of these, problem behaviors. And so the idea that I'm looking at today is kind of this question, how do we turn those demons into angels? And obviously that's very metaphoric, and I'm not talking literally or anything like that, but we have those problem students in class, those what we might refer to as demons, or there's lots of terminology that teachers use out there to describe these kinds of students. How do we take those and transform them into an angel? And again, I'm not talking about 100%. We're not talking about a perfect kind of person, but how do we take those problem students and turn them into students who are being productive and benefiting from our class? So I came up with some ideas of just some ways that we can approach these students to just work with them. And one of the things that I would throw out there at the beginning, one, there is no magic bullet. There is not something that is 100% effective. There will always be students that fall through. There will always be students who, these things just don't work on. But for a large part, these are things that can be very effective in reaching some of these students. And the other thing that I would throw out there is that this, kind of like so many other things in education, it's not an overnight fix. So this is something, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a lot of energy. But again, kind of like I've said with other things I've talked about, it is definitely worth it, the end results that you see. So the first thing I wanted to kind of look at is just the idea of being understanding. So one of the things that I've realized about myself and my students, especially in the school that I teach at, is, I don't come from the same background that they do. I grew up in a two-parent household. I was an only child. My mom was a teacher, so my entire life I was, very much connected with school and education. A lot of my aunts and uncles are educators as well. And so school was just a natural part of my life. It is not the same for some of these students. I've got so many students who come from single parent families, students who come from financially struggling families, students who have just so many different kind of background scenarios that I can't understand. I don't know what it's like to live in their shoes. And so one of the things that I try to do as much as possible is to make sure that I keep an understanding mindset for them. Sometimes they don't know that what they're doing is not appropriate because maybe they've never been told, or maybe that is the way that they act at home and it's not perceived as negative actions at home. It could be something as simple as nobody has shown interest in them, or nobody has stuck with them. And so they don't think anybody cares about them. And so they're not worried about how they affect someone else. And so what I try to do is keep that understanding mindset in mind as I go throughout my day. Typically, I try to remind myself that if a student lashes out at me, or if a student mouths off to me, or a student comes in a bad mood or whatever, I would say 99% of the time it has nothing to do with me. Things happen to them outside of our classroom that they bring in there with them, and they don't know how to cope. And so one of the things that I like to try to do is just try to talk to them as much as possible. I'll leave them space if they clearly don't want to talk about it, but if they're having a rough day, I try to understand, what they're going through, or at least tell them that they can, if they need to take care of themselves, that they should do that. Sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and kind of letting them know that their outside circumstances right now might be a higher priority than class, and I understand that. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm giving them a free pass on stuff that we do in class, that I'm exempting them from assignments or anything like that, but it is understanding that my class and my world is not the center of their universe, and so I cannot expect them to act that way. I have to work on being understanding with them. So if you have some of those problems, students, try to just be as understanding as you can of them, who they are, the situation, and work with them in that way. The next thing kind of goes along with the idea of being understanding, and that is just being compassionate. Our students need compassion. We live in a world that is just full of negativity, full of hatred, full of selfishness, and they are bombarded every day with these kinds of emotions. Sometimes we just need to show them some compassion. It's really easy with problem students to just write them up and let the administration handle it. They're being disruptive in my class. I just don't want them in my class for a few days. It's easy to do, but to me, it does not solve the issue at hand, because yes, you might be free of them for a few days, but when they come back into your classroom after serving ISS or being suspended for a few days or whatever it is that happens, are they going to be different? And to me, if the behavior is not changing, then the methods that we handle it should change. And so I try to be as compassionate as I can with my students. And we adopted a charter of compassion, which I'll probably talk about in a later episode with maybe a guest that can help out with that. But we have this charter of compassion that outlines how we expect to treat each other, both as teacher and as students and as peers and all of that. And we just have to offer some grace and some mercy to them sometimes. I think a lot of times as educators, as teachers, as adults, we get into this mindset that our students should act like us, forgetting that we have decades of life experience on them. And that, when I look back at who I was in high school, and I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was mischievous. I goofed off in class. I joked around. I mouthed off every once in a while. Not too much, though, because if I did it too much, then Mama at home would take care of it. But, a lot of our students don't get grace. They don't get mercy. They don't get time to grow and to learn. And so I would suggest and just kind of throw out there that take time to look at how you respond to them and ask yourself, is this something that is going to help them learn and grow? Or is this just a temporary Band-Aid that's being put on something that's not going to heal? So be understanding of who they are, of where they come from, and try to work with that. Be compassionate. Show them love. Show them mercy. Show them grace, even if they don't necessarily deserve it. The third thing, possibly going to be one of the most difficult things to do when it comes to turning our demon students into angels, and that is simply being patient. And I have a hard time sometimes with being patient with these students, because it's just like, I have talked to you every single day for 3 months about this same thing, and yet you are still doing it. It's hard. I understand that. And what we have to remember is that change does not happen overnight. Change is a long-term process. Change is something that is, with a lot of these students, is not going to dramatically shift from August to May. But if they are heading in the right direction, then that is the important thing. And so we've got to learn how to be patient with them, especially if we have taken the time to have those conversations with them. Now, I'm not saying let them get away with whatever they want. And I'm not saying that we should just ignore what they're doing in class, but we have to keep a patient mindset in dealing with them in the way that we respond to their behaviors. So instead of, kind of like I mentioned earlier, instead of just writing them up, are we having conversations with them about their behavior and what they're doing and why it doesn't work, how it affects other people? Do they understand that you have higher expectations for them? If you've set that up, then yeah, we got to be patient with it, because like I said, they're not just going to change. So you got to lay that groundwork. You got to lay that foundation of those expectations with them before you can work on helping them develop that change. But just keep in mind, in that process, you've got to be patient. We've got to be understanding. Even us as educators, there are things that we're very set in our ways with, and we don't like hearing that we need to change behaviors, in our classroom or at our workplace. But it is something that is expected, and think about how difficult it is for us to change certain habits that we have and develop skills to be better people. And when we can approach it with that mindset, I think a lot of times it helps us be a little bit more patient with them. And I'll just admit, like, I used to not be patient with students at all, but one of the things that really changed me was when I had my own child and watching her grow up and seeing how difficult it can be to teach someone else how to behave and how to act and how to respond. It has really shown me the importance of being patient, but also being there for them as they work through that process. And then the last thing is, this is more of an end goal of something that we can do to push them forward and push them outside of our classrooms as we finish the years out with them. And that's just simply the idea of being empowering. It doesn't stop with changing a behavior. It doesn't stop with helping a student understand what they should be doing versus what they shouldn't be doing. I think it's also important to give them direction and give them purpose. And so being empowering with our students is something that I think has a tremendous long-term effect for them. A lot of these students have never or rarely been told that they're good at anything. These kids that come into your classroom that are causing problems every day, that they've probably had the same thing happen to them. Maybe a teacher tried to work with them one time and then gave up on them because it wasn't working and they weren't changing. And so they just kind of got written off. They expect that from you. But when you take the time and keep doing it, then and find those positive things to reinforce with them, it shows them that you care not just about what's going on in your classroom, but you care about their success as a person. So look for the good. Look for the things that they are interested in, things that they are good at doing, and empower them to do what they can with that. So if I go back to that story that I told at the beginning of the segment about the kid that I almost got into a fight with my first day of teaching, that was one of the things that I was sort of able to do with him. So he was really good at fighting. He was like a MMA kind of whatever. I couldn't really use that in class, but I might talk to him about it a little bit when we're in class. But what I did find out, he was not good at writing. He was really behind on writing skills. But one of the things that I did find out about him was that he really loved to draw. And so I would try to find ways in class as we went out to give him opportunities to draw stuff. And that was one of the things that really got him into doing things in class, was when he was, freed up to do something like that, because he was really fearful of writing because he knew he was behind in it. And so that kind of shut him down right away. But when I gave him the freedom to bring in some of his drawing skills, it opened him up a lot more to it. And so I think it's really important to find those ways that we can empower our students into tapping into their natural curiosities, their natural talents, their natural skills that they are able to do, and then work those into things that we do in class so that they see that it is possible for them to be successful, even if they do not necessarily show confidence in the things that they do. So I know as I'm talking through all of this, I know that anybody listening probably has a student that has popped into your head as I'm kind of talking through this. I know I think about a lot of different students that I've had before and ones that I have now, ones that I know I have failed in doing this for, and ones that I don't want to fail right now as I have them. And so I would encourage you kind of as I finish up this segment here, if any of those students popped into your head as you're listening to this, don't wait. Tomorrow, when you go into the classroom, make it a point to try to work with whoever that student is that came to mind. And I'll just end this segment with one last little thing that has been a source of great encouragement for me just this past week. I do a weekly reflection where my students kind of reflect on what they did in class that week. And there's a section that gives them an opportunity to just say whatever they need, anything they want me to know. And I had a student, a senior, who is the second year that I've had this student. I had her 2 years ago as a sophomore. I have her this year as a senior. And I've been working with her and she's just struggling, lack of motivation, senioritis, all that kind of stuff. And in the weekly reflection this week, she actually just put in there how much she appreciated that I wasn't giving up on her. And that is kind of like my end goal. And when I read that, it really got to me and it reminded me that, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. That I'm not just trying to teach these students. I am trying to help them out in life in whatever they are going to do when they leave my classroom. And so hopefully you guys have experienced some of those same things. And if you have, I would greatly encourage you, hold on to those stories. Don't let them go. So that will do it for today's boss battle, and I think we can probably consider ourselves pretty sufficiently leveled up with our next level of teaching. Up next, it's going to be the question of the week. So for this week's question of the week, I want to hear some of your stories. What are some of your success stories that you've had with some problem students? So you had a student that came in your class, really struggled with them, but by the end of the year, something happened and they became, different. What was that? What did you do? What were some of the, the things that you did that gave you that success? So give me some of those success stories. Stories might be a little bit long to post on Twitter, but if you got something short and quick, you can post it on Twitter with the hashtag 8BitCrew. That's the number 8BitCrew. And longer stories, head on over to the blog page at 8bitinstructor.com and the episode page for episode 14 and type your stories up. I'd love to share those on future episodes. So that will just about do it for this week's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, don't miss next week's episode. Next week, I've got another special guest. Yukai Chow joins me next week, and he talks some game design and gamification principles and how we can use those in the classroom to help motivate students. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Yukai Chow, he's kind of the gamification guru in a lot of areas. So make sure you download that episode. So much for listening this week. Make sure you get connected. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Socks, and you can use the hashtag 8BitCrew, the number 8BitCrew. You can check out other content at the website 8bitinstructor.com. Again, that is the number 8bitinstructor.com. And you can check out the YouTube channel for some EdTech tutorials and such. I will hopefully be working on getting a lot more stuff put up on there because I'd like to have more things. And if you have any ideas of stuff you'd like to see, feel free to shoot me a message on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe so that you can download the latest episodes as they come out. And please, please, please spread the word and tell others about the show and help us to build up a great community of educators who want to continue to improve our teaching craft. So I'll leave you to it. Until next week, keep leveling up that educator's craft, and may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comic Socks and use the hashtag 8BitCrew. See you next week.